Right. So, yay. Okay. We're live, and from the looks of YouTube, it's Thomas's screen that's being shared and not the introductory screens here. That's fine. We're just doing this for you guys here. So, usual start of a meetup event, everything goes wrong. So, thanks everyone for bearing with us while we got started. So we've got new hosts this month. Thank you to Kodak for hosting us, and Zan for hooking us up with Max. So thank you very much for that. Schedule for this evening, we have my clicker's not working. Oh, it's because I might be going down. A couple of talks. So we've got, first up, we've got Thomas, who is if you're watching on YouTube, I'm guessing his screen's up already, so we can start watching that. He's going to be talking about the wonders of creating a headless UI library for Svelte. If you follow what's going on with UI libraries, I don't want to give too much away with what Thomas is going to be talking about, but there's some pretty interesting stuff happening there. And then we've also got a talk from Lucy, who's here with us in person. And this is how to introduce new technology at work and why you maybe shouldn't. So that's go on 2 slides. That's it. So we've just got some general housekeeping, and I don't know what it is now. So just for us here, toilets down here to the right, upstairs just behind reception. Food is on the way. It's going to turn up somewhere. I'm not sure when. Should be soon. But please try to be respectful with anyone who is talking at the time, not to try and disrupt what's going on. So with that being said, we're going to get Thomas up to talk. So Thomas, you can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can everyone hear me?
Cool. So what we need to do, I think everyone on stream can actually see your screen, but we can't see it here. So just bear with us a second while we get this done, and we'll give you the go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, Thomas, you're good to go. Are you okay to hang about for a Q&A after you finish the talk?
Yeah, please.
Awesome. Okay, I'll leave it to you. We're just going to take Lucy out of the stream here, so it's just you in the corner. Brilliant. Cool. Thank you.
All right. So thank you, Scott. Hello, everyone. So component libraries. Either you love them or you hate them. That's the feeling I usually get when listening to other developers' rants, be it every other day at Reddit or every day at Twitter. They seem amazing for getting your ideas quick off the ground and launching your brand new app idea that makes you all giddy when you get 10 page views. But once you start trying to customize it, be it changing its default styles or changing functionality, markup, it's often a huge pain. Styles can be hard to alter, you often can't override its default behavior, and even when you manage to, you probably made yourself a bunch of spaghetti code. So you start feeling the urge to check it off your project. But now you've reached the other end, where making a shiny, customizable select component from scratch is not as simple as you thought. There are so many things to be aware of. Browser compatibility, accessibility, focus management, form handling, keyboard navigation, type ahead, positioning, viewport collisions, scroll locking, and all of this is making you rethink if it was a good idea to drop out of computer science college, at least for me. This usually puts you in 2 extremes. The love or hate boundary I mentioned, or the infamous, it depends. But what if after losing your head with all this nonsense, there was a middle ground? Well, you may consider going headless. You may have heard the term headless before, but perhaps you've only known about headless UI, which is a library by the same folks behind Tailwind, or you may think it's just another made-up fuzzy tech word that doesn't make much sense, and you're not entirely wrong. But headless libraries came to solve that frustration we deal when creating our web applications with UI libraries. While most component libraries would give you a fully styled component for you out of the box, just like this, where you would probably just have a component and an items prop for a tag component like this, and not much way to style it, headless libraries give you unstyled building blocks, such as we can see the trigger content here. And these building blocks contain all the functionality needed to make accessible components. You can move these blocks around, you can style them with CSS, or with Tailwind, or if you're stuck in 2016, CSS and JS. You can even choose which elements to render or how you choose to override functionality. This permits you full control over your design system without needing to waste hours and hours to make something functional, only to realize you missed tons of edge cases that libraries have already ironed out. It's the perfect middle ground. Naturally, when I discovered headless libraries, I fell in love. I first learned the concept when coming across Radix UI, which is one of the biggest headless libraries for React, or the framework who shall not be named. It is super polished, made by an incredible team, have battle tested the library to exhaustion. Here you can see an example of their test components. But then I started using Svelte and fell in love with that too, as you may have imagined. I use Svelte for all my projects, both work and personal, and it's a joy to use. It solves almost all of my needs. But it doesn't have Radix. I've searched far and wide for alternatives in Svelte and left empty-handed. Don't get me wrong, there are headless libraries in Svelte, but they're few and far in between, and whenever I come across one, they're either no longer maintained, missing components I like to use, or I simply didn't feel like it fitted my needs, which is fine. We all have our preferences. So I started building my own headless library. I went with quite the immediate approach. I created Radix Svelte. If I missed Radix in Svelte, well, then I was just going to do it myself. And at first, everything was going great. Here you can see I just embedded an iframe of Radix Svelte. You can see a lot of components. This is me. And you can see this is an accordion component, for example. It is fully headless, as I mentioned. It can be completely styled. You can change the order around. You can make it vertical. You can do whatever you want here. And we can even see the code a little bit. You can see I'm styling this with Tailwind. I have all these separate blocks instead of having just one single accordion component, and everything works as intended. But something was a bit off as I started developing Radix Svelte more and more. First, I ran into a problem with styling. In Svelte, we have a marvelous feature with scoped styles. The problem is this, which is a Radix Svelte example, doesn't work. Why is that? Scoped classes only work for elements. Since this is a prop that we pass inside the component, this wouldn't work. So this would work great if I was using Tailwind or something like that, but scoped styles just wouldn't work. The only way would be to do kind of like a hacky solution, which is where you have a scoped element, and then you use the global selector to target the class inside. But not only is this a bit verbose and kind of hard to use, it also has some accessibility concerns in some browsers like Safari. Always Safari bringing us issues. There's also the problems with directives, such as actions and transitions. These do not work with components. So the only way I would be able to use these would maybe be exposing props inside the components, but that's also not very elegant. It's a bit verbose as well, and these props are error prone. But the hardest issue for me was doing render delegation. So what is that? Radix UI has a little prop called asChild. What does that mean? Normally, you can see here that an accordion trigger, it would choose a default element, which is button, right? So what if I didn't want to use a button? What if I wanted to use a div, like a lunatic? Well, with Radix, what they do is they have asChild, and then I can just pass in any element, and that element will receive all the props and event listeners that the original element would normally receive. The thing is, in Svelte, it's a little bit harder. We don't have access to the actual element, the actual slot elements, the children elements that we pass. We can't just pass in props. We do have slot props and stuff like that, but no way to do it with just a single prop like this. It was going to be quite verbose. I felt like all of this was getting too complicated and that this was becoming less and less a headless library due to the limitations I found because it was so hard to customize. So I started coming across some other libraries that used a different approach. Instead of exporting these components, they'd export component props and listeners. So I came up with some proof of concepts. This is the end result I came up with. I call this a builder. So what a builder does, it's just a function that returns, in our case, stores and actions. For anyone who's not familiar with a Svelte action, which I had mentioned before, a Svelte action is just a little function that receives an element and can do anything you want with it. In this case, what I usually do is I'm assigning event listeners. I'm going to show a bit of code later on. But with this builder, I can just spread props. They are reactive, since this is a star, and use actions to deal with event listeners. And I can also export states. I can also export helpers and export everything. And this solves all our problems. We can use scope styles with this. We can use transitions. We can use directives. We can use any element we want. It's the perfect solution. So I started building another library. I did Radix Svelte, and I started building Melt UI. Developing Melt has been one of the most amazing experiences I've had as a developer. Starting with a small community of developers who were previously following my efforts with Radix, Melt has gathered tons of amazing people who have helped me with feedback, contributions, both in code and design, and who keep sharing this project with so many others. And it's still all really surreal to me. And it's going by so quickly too. It's been roughly 2 months since Melt released, and we already are nearing 30 component builders in our library. And how did we make it so quick? As mentioned before, obviously, the community support has been truly significant for Melt UI. I wouldn't have been able to do this in so short time all on my own. But I'm really, really grateful for the outstanding tools the Svelte team has created because they really made this possible. I've never experienced such a hassle-free way to develop libraries as I have with SvelteKit. If you ever tried developing a JavaScript package before, it's quite hellish. You may have run into a lot of the same issues I have, having to deal with CommonJS and ES module support, having to use npm link to test out your package, creating a monorepo to use your package in your docs, troubles with TypeScript to JavaScript compilation, troubleshooting where your folders can be important, etc. You get the gist. But SvelteKit makes it so much easier. And I want to show you why. I want to build our own small headless library from scratch just to show you how we can do this. So to create a library with Svelte, it's pretty simple. First, you just need to do npm create Svelte like you would just a normal project. I don't know if everyone can see my terminal. If not, don't worry, nothing too important is being done here. But once you run npm create Svelte, and let's say I want to create a wonderful library, you can choose to create a library project, right? And when you do that, this will be created for us. So this is just a normal Svelte project. Let me initialize that just so I can show you. And now, I've gone ahead and created just a simple page and some simple styling just so this doesn't look bad. But when we create a SvelteKit library using npm create, it's just like a normal SvelteKit app, which at first seems odd. Why? Why do we have routes in a library? Why do we have all that? Well, when you create a package with SvelteKit, the nice thing is you also have your routes. So we have two folders that you usually see in your project, lib and routes. The thing is, if you go to index.js, you see I'm exporting something here. Everything that's exported from this index.js file is going to be what your package exports automatically. And everything in your routes can be used for your docs. At least that's how I do it in Melt UI. meaning I can just import create tabs here and use it as usual. And to actually build the package and ship it, we also have all the scripts necessary. You see I have a dependency here called Svelte package. And it's being used here on build and on package. What this does is it builds out everything from the lib folder, all TypeScript definitions, deals with all the imports for you, and then you can just publish our library. It is really that simple. I have run into no hassles with this. And I'm going to show you a little bit how I've done that and how we can create also a really simple tabs example of this. So I've gone ahead and created a small function here. It's just a simple builder. It's a simple function which accepts a default value string, right? And we have a little value store here. So I can call this in my page folder. So const tabs equals create tabs. Let's import that. No suggestions. Thank you, VS Code. Can do it like this. And I'm not sure if this is working. Let's try that one. Let's see. Well, it is perfect. Yeah, okay. I'm just not getting autocomplete, but that's fine. Now, we need to, if we look at Melt UI, let's go to the website and look at the tab components. We need some elements, right? So if I'm just looking at here, just looking at this quite simply, what do we need? Well, we at least need some buttons to change the tabs, and we need content, right? That automatically changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create two elements. We're going to create trigger, and we're going to create content. Well, and then we're going to expose them as elements. So trigger and content. Awesome. Now, what is trigger and content going to be? Well, we know we need attributes, and we know we need actions, right? So we can start doing maybe the trigger action. The trigger action is quite simple. It's just a node, which is an HTML element. Remember that if anyone has any doubts later on, I'll be open for Q&A. But yeah, we have a click handler, which on click will basically set this value to something, but to what? Well, I can do the trigger attributes be a function. This function will accept the tab value, which is also a string. And we can then set a data attribute. Data value will be tab value. And now what I can do here is just to do node.dataset.value. You notice it's erroring out because it can possibly be undefined. And let's do const tab value equals this. And this is a bit odd, but it should work. I'm going to deal with this later. So node.addEventListener, click, and I'll click. This is just standard JavaScript. All actions must have a destroy command that runs when the element is going to be destroyed. In this case, we just want to remove the event listeners. And oops. Awesome. Well, let's do an S here. Sorry. Perfect. Now, what I want to do is also create content. Content is going to be a derived. Why is that? derived store, well, we already have our value. We want to conditionally hide the content based on the value. So we want that if the content value is, say, tab 1, let me show you how that looks. We don't want to, and the value is tab 2, I don't want to show the content. So if I had trigger and content elements and I had 2 buttons, tab 1, and this trigger, and use this trigger. I'm going to do this a little bit better later on. This uses trigger tab 1, and this one, this tab 2, we also have content. So we have content, and we're going to use also an ID here, let's say a value, use content. Right. So what you can do is create a derived. It accepts the value store as its first parameter, meaning we're deriving from value. And it's going to return a function. Just like trigger has a function for tab value, we also can just copy this. The thing is, we also are going to return a hidden attribute. So how do we know if something is hidden? Well, hidden is going to be if value is different than tab value. Pretty simple. The reason I'm doing this ternary is because if we set it as false, the attribute is still present and the browser is still going to hide it. Okay, perfect. We don't even need an action here, actually. Content is done. We can test if it works if, oops. Let's say this error and value. Oh, yeah, we're not defining it. That's my bad. Let's do it like this. Let's also do the following. Trigger.action is going to be this. Perfect. Now we can just do .action here. And I'm going to show the value here just for debugging purposes. Awesome. I have everything here. I have tab 1, tab 2, just to have a flex not working. But we can see that the tab 2 content doesn't show. If I remove this hidden attribute, it would. We have tab 1 content and tab 2 content. Now we just need to see why the action is not working, and we have everything we need. Let me just test one thing. Well, what I'm going to do, I forgot why this isn't working, but fortunately, I already did this before. So I can just go to main. And that's it. Cool. It's pretty similar to what we have. I'm not sure what I did wrong there. Someone smarter than me can probably spot it out, but you can see it looks pretty similar to what we had. I just added some classes here just to show, and you can see it all works. So now we have a pretty wonderful library going on. But that's not all I want to show. What I want to show that creating this, that actually building this out and testing this out on a separate project is pretty simple. Now, I probably would not want to create a separate docs package for this. SvelteKit lets us use our routes, use our components inside our routes, just as I showed here, which is marvelous. But in case you wanted to test it out or just use it in another project, you could just do npm link global, or just npm link if you're using npm. And then on a separate project that I already pre-created too, which is here, which I'm also going to, oh, it's already up. What's the port? Cool. So in a separate project, see, we can just do npm link, wonderful library, which is the name of our package. Perfect. And we can basically copy this code. The only difference is This is not present in lib. Thank you, VS Code. It's present in wonderful library. Let's change this to playground just to show that it's a separate thing. And everything works as intended. And if I actually wanted to publish to NPM, how hard would that be? It's not hard at all. I could just go here and do NPM publish. That automatically builds your package out for you. And yeah, I'm not going to actually publish. It's asking for my password. I'm not going to do that because someone may want to use the name wonderful library. But yeah, that's all you would need to do to actually publish your package. After it's done and ready, you just need to do publish. SvelteKit builds it out for you. It's marvelous. And if you want to run tests before, you can do everything you want in the scripts. So now that you've seen how a really basic TAD component works with this architecture, what about actually Melt UI? How does that look? Is it humongous code? Actually, no, it's pretty simple. So I also have Melt UI open here, already open out for me. And let's open up that dev server. So many parts going on. And bear with me. Cool. This is run entirely on SvelteKit. You can see that the project structure is a little bit similar. We have lib and have an index exporting builders and some actions, right? And you can see that here we also have that same package thing. We also have this Svelte package somewhere here. We all know JavaScript developers love their packages. So here you go. And we have tabs. How does that look? It's not that large, only 200 lines of code. And this tabs is much more advanced. Instead of just clicking, you have keyboard navigation. You have, let me show you, you have vertical orientation support somewhere. So this is how it looks in Melt. It looks pretty similar to what I showed you. It just has list and root elements added and some more props. So I can do orientation, vertical. Let it load, and you can see it works naturally. And just as promised by headless libraries, I can style them the way I want. I can order them around. Sorry, Tailwind haters for the mode of classes, but I can use Tailwind. I can use scope styles. I also use some scope styles here, as you can see. It's marvelous. I can also use animations. If you don't know, this little thing that I'm not sure if the stream catches, but there's a small animation going on here. I'm using Svelte animations for that. Here you go. You can use everything you want. And one thing good about using a headless library is most of them, and Melt UI, they are accessibility focused. So in here, looking a little bit at the code, I deal with a lot of little accessibility attributes that need to be added, like adding rows and types and stuff like that, and tab indexes to make sure that everything is according to accessibility standards. And this is something that's really hard to do on your own. Now, I also want to go through some of Melt's features that show how flexible a headless library can truly be. So going to Melt, first something we can see is we have, if you look at the code here, you will see that the syntax is a little bit different from what I showed you. But if I toggle this, the preprocessor, you can see that it's not that different actually. So Svelte also has something really cool called preprocessors that you may or may not be aware of. Basically, they're just things that look at your code and transform it before actually running them. At Melt, we ship a preprocessor so that instead of you having to write spread attributes like this and an action for every element, you can just use Melt, then you just pass the elements. So that's something that's really cool that I've only seen in Svelte. One thing that a headless library also permits is, as I said, we want to be able to style, but we also want to be able to override default behavior. we can do that with something called custom events. So we have a bunch of actions, right? And all of them create event listeners, as we've seen in the code. So if I go to trigger, we can see an action here, and we can see add melt event listener. This is a little bit different. Why add melt event listener? Well, not only we listen to the click event, we also ship in a little custom event. What we can do with custom events? Well, I'll show you. Recently, today actually, in Melt.ui Discord, a user was reported a little odd behavior, let's say, which is the following. Let's say you have a slider, and it starts with a default value of 1, the maximum is 13, and you have a step of 5. Okay, so I'll let this load. Okay. Oh, and let me show in a little value here, just so we don't get lost. Awesome. So this starts with a value of 0, right? Now we press the arrow, the right arrow key, it goes to 5, it goes to 10. Now the step is of 5, but the maximum is 13. So what will happen if I press the arrow key again? Should it stay where it is? Should it go to 14? Will it bug out and go to 15, which in that case, I will be really embarrassed? Well, in Melt.ui's case, it goes to 13. We're discussing if this is the intended behavior. But let's say it was, and you didn't like this behavior for any case. Do you just chuck Melt.ui off and do your own slider? No, you don't need to. You can do something we call controlled usage. So what you do is on value change. On value change is a function that will always receive the current value and the next value. The next value means that in case we didn't have this function, what would the next value be? I'm going to console log that just so you can see what that is. And then you need to return what the value will actually be. So if I do console log here, and you can read it, I hope. Anytime I toggle, you can see that there's the current value. So we're at 3 now. If I press to the left, it's going to show 3 for the current value, and the next value is 0. The thing is, we can intercept this. So let's say I didn't want this to go to 13 when I'm on 10, right? So what I can do is I can check, let's say const is multiple of 5 equals next. Oops. And since this is an array, I'm just going to get the first item. And if it's not a multiple of 5, I'm going to return the current value. I want to stay for it to stay where it is. Otherwise, I'm going to return the next value. Okay, let it load, and let's see how that works. Okay, cool. I'm pressing the arrow key, just trust me, and it's staying where it's at. So we don't need to check Melt.ui off our project. We can just override stuff. And I know I was going to talk about custom events, and I am. I got lost a little bit there, but we have an example right here in the docs with select. So in select, when you focus the select, if you press the arrow key, it will open the select for you. But a user one time requested that, hey, why doesn't it just change the option for you without opening the menu? I was like, you can do that, but you need to implement it yourself, but it's pretty easy. So if I select and press the arrow keys, I can change the options. How did I do that? Well, if I take a look at the code, remember that I said we ship custom events? So you can see here an on and key down, and for melt. So our custom events ship a prevent default, which in this case will cancel the default builder behavior, meaning that it won't do anything at all unless you add some extra functionality now. And you can see here that I also prevent default the original event, so I cancel page scrolling. Otherwise, if I press the up and down arrow keys, the page will scroll everywhere. And then I just do some custom logic, and I can set the selected, I can set the open values, I can set everything, because all builders, they return these internal stars they use, and then you can just modify them yourselves. Not only that, if you go to control here in the docs, you can see that we can also bring your own star. So let's say you had an external value and you wanted to use that external value to control your builders. Well, you could. You can just create a custom star and pass it in as a prop. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, okay, this is quite cool, but at the same time, this is quite complex. I'm not used to using builders. I'm used to using components. Well, MeltUI is quite complex and advanced, but it was made for you to create components. It's a component builder library, as I like to call it. And so we already are seeing some libraries appearing that use Melt to create their own components. The most recent example is Huntabyte's BitsUI. So here it is. Let me go to this GitHub. It's easier. So Huntabyte helped me a ton with MeltUI. Huge thanks to him. Without him, this wouldn't be possible. But if I go to BitsUI, BitsUI looks a lot like Radix, where we hit components. So if you want to use that familiar component structure without actually using builders, but still want that headless behavior, you can with Bits. And then if you want to, I want more controlled behavior, you can just start using Melt. And what's cool about Bits is that Huntabyte also creates a little project you may have heard of called ShadCN Svelte. ShadCN Svelte is a library that grabs Bits UI, and so therefore Melt UI, and already provides pre-styled components. But unlike a normal component library, these are not installed. Besides the name here, they're copy-pasted into your library. So you can then just edit them. Instead of you importing accordion, as I showed in the slide before, the whole component structure is copied into your project and you can customize it however you want. This is just kind of like a template for you. And this is awesome. This permits you to get started pretty quickly, which is what component libraries, normal component libraries want to provide for you. But at the same time, it still provides you that flexibility and that customization that is normally so hard to do with normal component libraries. So that's why I say it's the perfect middle ground. And yeah, that's a little bit of the world of headless libraries. Thank you all for listening. As I said, this wouldn't be possible with Huntabyte and with some other awesome folks who helped me throughout this journey. I didn't list all my contributors and all the amazing supporters of my Discord who all have been great with feedback, with support. It's been really amazing. And yeah, thank you all for listening. I hope this brought some value to all y'all and that you are now more interested in headless libraries. Now, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Awesome. So can you hear us okay, Thomas?
Yeah, I can.
Brilliant. Okay. Awesome talk. Thank you so much. I've been following what's been going on with both you and Huntabyte. And it's a great talk. So thank you very much. We're going to open up to any questions. Just while I have you, just want to pause it there for a second because the food has turned up. So
yeah,
what I'm
sure.
going to ask everyone here to do is, if you want food, go and grab some now. Come take a seat again because then Lucy's up next. But we're going to take some Q&A from Thomas. If anyone's got a question for Thomas, let us know. Oh, is pizza more important? Oh dear. It looks like pizza's more important than asking questions. Do you want to come and ask?
So I've also been following MeltUI's progress pretty closely. I know it's mostly complete, only a few components left, like the calendar. So after those components are done, what's the plan for MeltUI and BitsUI?
So for Melt UI, we actually still want to add more builders. I would say the 1.0 release, it's just like the components we really want to have for a complete version, I'd say, but there are more components we want to ship, docs improvements. One thing I want to do too is we have a lot of really useful actions we use internally, and I would like to be able to ship them too as part of the MeltUI Svelte package. And that won't need like a new major version because those are just features and not breaking changes. And besides that, one thing that we also are thinking of is maybe creating an opinionated way, just like BitsUI created a component library from Melt. Maybe we also want to create something on the Melt organization that's similar to Bits, but that's not necessarily something we would do. It's just something that I thought of. Maybe we also do something like ShedCN, but under our own control. It's not a board, so we can do whatever we want there. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty free reign, but I would say first, before any of those ideas, I really want to make sure to add more to the core package of MeltUI.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Hi, Thomas. I've got a question around with Svelte 5 being at some point, possibly soon or maybe next year, who knows. I'm curious if there's anything you would want to see MeltUI focused in Svelte 5, such as better support for like stores outside of components or something like that.
So what I would really like is first, what I showed with the preprocessor was kind of like to improve the syntax, which we thought was too verbose. So right now, if you don't use a preprocessor, you need to put actions and spread props. In other frameworks, normally event listeners can also be spread together with props. So if we could use that, we wouldn't even need a preprocessor at all. Alternatively, what would be really cool and in line with the Svelte ecosystem is having SSR actions. What does that mean? When I use an action, it only works with JavaScript, meaning that it won't work on server-side render, right? It only works with client-side JavaScript, meaning I can't define attributes on server render. But if actions could expose like an SSR attribute together with destroy and update, then it would work. That would be really awesome to have. Barring that, you mentioned ability to use reactive syntax outside of templates and Svelte components, stuff like that. I feel like that would be awesome in general, not necessary for MeltUI. I don't think that limits MeltUI, but yeah, I think that would be awesome in general. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping Svelte 5 does something more for SSR now that SvelteKit's more of a thing. Definitely feels like it needs some love.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, TypeScript support is also something that, in general, it's pretty good. And since I think TypeScript support is harder to do in Svelte components, but since most of Melt is done in TypeScript files, we don't suffer too much on that. But when creating a component library, TypeScript definitions and stuff like that can be a bit hard to do. I definitely suffered through that when doing Radix Svelte. But there's a lot of RFCs open, and I hope they get merged by the time Svelte comes around to get some better TypeScript support.
Awesome. Valentin, you got a question? All right. Just a thumbs up of approval. Does anyone else have any questions for Thomas before we say goodbye and we get Lucy up to talk? No. I'll just check in the chat as well. There's nothing online. So we're going to say thank you, Thomas. And we're going to get Lucy up. So there's just a bit of the usual meetup stuff we need to do. And I need to run over to StreamYard and take you off the stream there. So once again, if we will give Thomas a big round of applause, please.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. It's been a blast. Thank you, Scott, too.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm going to take you off the stream now. We're going to get Lucy on. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.
I think that's it.
Right, I'll just check the.
Yeah. Do let me know in the stream if you can or cannot hear me. Good to go? Good to go. Okie doke. Hi everyone. My name's Lucy. Please do let me know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please do let me know if I am too loud or too quiet because I have no idea. I cannot hear anything. My talk is on how to introduce new technology and why you maybe shouldn't. So, hi, my name's Lucy. There's a lovely picture of me when I went to a wedding. I prefer they, them pronouns. I'm a senior front-end developer at Codat, so this building, technically we don't have front-end developers here, but don't tell anyone. I love functional programming, sewing my own clothes, and making PowerPoints, so please do enjoy. And I have a website that you can look at now, and there's actually stuff on there, so if you want to go check me out, lucym.dev, it's worthwhile, trust me. And so, first things first, in conclusion, someone who is much cleverer than me told me you should put the conclusion first. So first of all, you can stop listening after 2 minutes. Second of all, we know what we're aiming for. So introducing new technology has benefits, but the risks do need to be considered and managed. People are reluctant to change. Change is hard. You must have a really good reason to change the status quo. And at the end of the day, it's the really boring things that matter. So good engineering practices, I'm sorry to say it, but writing documentation, very, very important. So let's get started. In this talk, I will talk about number one, why you might want to use Svelte over React, which I assume you all want to do. The risks involved that we found in using Svelte and how we manage them, and how the learnings can be applied outside of this project. So part number one, why you might want to use Svelte over React. So I promise I will not pick on you. I just want nods, hands, any kind of reaction. Who here has used Svelte? Who here has used Svelte professionally at their company? Okay, quite a few. Who would like to use Svelte professionally at their company? Okay, no. So you can take this away and you can tell everyone that Svelte is the best and you should use it. So what is Svelte? I'm sure you all know. This is put in just in case. So Svelte is a JavaScript front-end library. It is very similar to all those other JavaScript libraries that apparently we do not name, like React, Vue, Ember, bit of a dodgy logo, but okay, and Angular, my arch nemesis. We don't talk about Angular. So this is the chart of usage from the 2022 State of JavaScript survey. So if you haven't read the State of JavaScript survey, highly recommend it, fascinating. This blue line at the top is React. So in 2022, it is around 80% usage. So we at Codat, like many other companies, use React. It is basically the industry standard now. Yellow line down here is Svelte, which is now up to about 20% usage, which is pretty good, but I think it's overinflated in professional contexts. React 16.8, aka the one with hooks, actually came out basically as Svelte came around. And I don't know about you, but I feel React has not advanced a huge amount since React with hooks, whereas Svelte went from being basically unused to actually a pretty good to use framework. So I'm not saying this, but I think React might get knocked off its pedestal soon. I can hope. So at the end of the day, Svelte is a front-end framework. You use it as a tool to get something done. They can basically do everything you need them to do. Performance. I'm just not going to talk about it. Massive can of worms. People say Svelte is better. People say it's the same as React. I'm just not going to talk about it. Too difficult to compare. But React is a great framework. Svelte is a great framework. Every framework's got its benefits. Every framework has its drawbacks. You might like one, I might like the other. That's fine. Every normal human has their own favorite framework, I think. So why do we want to use Svelte? So for a particular project at our company, we have something called Link. So the way Link works, essentially our users on client.com, they have to send their users out to link.codat.io in order to do something. I don't know about you guys, I've done a hell of a lot of phishing training in my time, so I immediately look at the URL and I'm like, oh gosh, what is Codat? So essentially we have this issue of people needing to trust our domain, and we didn't really want to do that. So what we wanted to do instead was have a way for our users to put Link into their own website, just like this really, really accurate diagram that you can see here. So one really big problem is we have no idea what's going on in the blue section. We have no control over it. They could be doing anything. They could be using any number of frameworks. They could think jQuery is still the best thing to do. They might think that just JavaScript is the best thing to do. Point being, we have no control over this. They could be doing anything. So if you take a look at any React library on GitHub, this is some random one I found on GitHub. This is the package JSON. There's a section here that says peer dependencies. So in case you don't know, what a peer dependency means is someone consuming this library has to have React running, but the library will not set it up for them. So the library assumes React is running. You have to have React running, essentially. So if we wanted to build our library with React, we would have this issue of we need a compatible version of React. So let's say we did decide to build this in React 18. How easy would it be for a user to consume this? So in React 17 or 18, that's fine. They're compatible. It's easy. Everything works fine. In a non-React framework, it's okay. You do need to load up a version of React, and then you end up in this horrible scenario where you've got two frameworks running side by side, and it's like a bit nasty, but it's okay. And React before version 17, I have no idea. I don't want to think about it. It can't be anything good. So Svelte libraries do not have Svelte as a peer dependency. They are entirely free of runtime dependencies. So how easy would it be to use a version of our library written in Svelte? Well, actually, it doesn't matter what you're using. It's easy. There's no runtime dependencies. It's just JavaScript. So looking at this, we have a really, really compelling reason to use Svelte over React. Big asterisk here, though. This reasoning only applies for this particular project. So after using Svelte, I had many people being like, let's use Svelte for everything. And I'm like, no, just this project, please. So we figured out we want to use Svelte. What's next? Well, we just turn up and we say, we're going to use Svelte now. And then everyone turns around and is like, nah, I don't really want to. Why should I use Svelte? Like, why? So let's think about why someone might not want to use Svelte. What are the risks in using Svelte over React? So first of all, we don't have any professional experience using Svelte. We've used it for personal projects. We have not used it professionally. It might be terrible. It may not work how we expect. We may think it's great when doing a pet project, but it might just crumble under the pressure when we try and do something big with it. And lastly, we have to maintain it. Projects like this live long after the original people wrote it, and some poor soul who doesn't know Svelte will have to look back at this project and figure out how to use Svelte and how to do their stuff with it. So we figured out we want to use Svelte. Part number 2 is figuring out what the risks are. Well, we've looked at that. How can we minimize those risks? How can we persuade people these risks actually aren't so bad? So let's start with learning Svelte. So it's it's inevitable. We're switching from React to Svelte. We need to know how it works. So I pop in and I say, well, I already know React. Is it easy for me to pick up Svelte? And if you already know how to use it, there's a lot of very common concepts. So here's just a splat of words that I thought of in about 2 minutes. I'm sure you can think of more, but these are just some words that are common between Svelte and React. And if I know about something, then it's easier to learn. Like if I know about React lifecycle, I can pick up Svelte lifecycle as well. And also, like, if you take your glasses off, I don't know if you guys are like me, like they're basically the same, right? Basically indistinguishable. Sorry, PowerPoint has a really good library of cut-out people, and I just try and use them at every opportunity, so I do apologize. If you've got common concepts, you can type them into your favorite search engine, and you can figure something out significantly quicker than if you had no idea what React was. So actually, learning Svelte isn't so bad. In addition to that, we're still in the same ecosystem. We're still using TypeScript to write our app. We're still using Cypress to test everything. We're still using VS Code to write things, unless you're a WebStorm user, in which case you are dead to me. We still use Azure DevOps to deploy things. And we're still in the NPM ecosystem, which means I can still use my favorite packages. So actually, moving from Svelte to React isn't so crazy. So if I'm building an app in Svelte or any framework, it's really, really, really easy to just shove everything into your component files. And you end up with component files that are just trying to do everything. This bakes you really heavily into that framework. So I don't particularly like doing this. I much prefer the approach of saying, let's try and pull as much as we can out of the Svelte components and into TypeScript files. So with a bit of thought, there's actually quite a lot of things you can pull out. So for example, models and logic live quite nicely in TypeScript files. API calling logic, including things like refetching, caching, parsing your responses, that lives quite nicely in TypeScript files. Application state lives quite nicely in TypeScript files. And handily, we already know TypeScript. So we already know how to do at least half the stuff according to this very, very scientific diagram. So that makes the learning curve a lot easier for us. So TLDR, even though you're not reading it, you can make it easier to learn by leaning on tools you already know. So in this case, we're leaning on TypeScript quite a lot. So quick segue for architecture. So our app is a wizard. There's a number of steps. The user can move between the steps. They can move back and forth. They can click on a load of stuff and end up in all kinds of crazy places, but they're pretty much fixed on these steps. This is where you can go from this step to that step. So architecture we're going to use. Each step has got something called state. So state defines what each step needs to function. Then you have the actions. So the actions define on a step, what can you do there? What can the user do? Then you have your reducer function, which takes the state, takes an action, and gives you what should the new state be. And then we have our view that turns that application state into something that's actually rendered on the screen. And I can tell it in some of your faces. You're sat there going like, this is just Redux. And yeah, it basically is just Redux, but it's not. So why does this matter? Well, going back to this handy dandy diagram, our state, actions, and reducer live quite nicely in TypeScript land, whereas our views have to live in Svelte land. So another really nice thing about this, all of these pure code files, dead easy to test. You don't have to worry about rendering. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It's just code. It goes in, it goes out. It's dead quick. Anyway, now we've got our architecture. We move on to everyone's favorite thing, documentation. So I basically took this architecture, wrote it up into a Confluence doc, send it around to everyone. This initially was for me to just get my ideas down and to communicate to the rest of the team. But actually, during the building process, we made sure to refer back to these docs. We made sure to refine these docs. We made sure to make sure they were still up to date and accurate. Because it's really easy to fall into the trap of writing your docs, immediately forgetting about them, and then a month down the line, they're completely wrong. So in a few years' time, when someone else is looking at this project, maybe me, I don't know. And they might be a little puzzled as to like, what on earth were these people thinking? What are these design decisions? Why did they do this? Like, I don't know how many times I've looked at a bit of code without documentation and been like, oh, this is interesting. But it's fine because they can just find the docs, they can read through it, and they can say, okay, well, I understand what was going through their head. I understand why they did this. I don't agree with it, but it's okay because it's all there. And then you can it can help you navigate the code, things like that, understand everything that's going on. How can I talk about documentation without talking about testing? So me, I love test-driven development. I'm not even going to lie. I think it's fantastic. I think if you're not doing it, then you're making your lives difficult. So test-driven development is essentially you are writing your tests, your unit tests for your stuff as you go. And you can have really strong comprehensive test suites that essentially are codifying your specifications. So somebody else looking back at it can confidently make changes to their code, and they can say, oh, well, I haven't broken the test, so probably haven't broken anything. You never know, but gives you a little bit more confidence than if you just head up to a code base that's got no test. You're like, well, I guess I'm just going to go for it. So yeah, TLDR of this talk essentially is please write docs and good tests. Future you will thank you. I'm eternally grateful for those docs I wrote. They made it so much easier, and I think everyone should do it. But next thing, what if it all goes wrong? What if Svelte is terrible? What if all these people who like Svelte are just liars and it's a big cult and I've just bought into it? And what if React is the true king of everything? So you kind of have to, like, you don't want to get into this situation where you're looking at it and you're like, is it meant to do that? Is that what it's meant to do? Is it like, am I being crazy? This just doesn't make sense to me. So something catastrophically terrible might have happened, and I might have just been there being like, oh my God, I'm stuck with it. This is all my fault. You know, I cannot sleep at night because I'm too busy worrying about this Svelte thing I did. And oh my God. So have an escape plan. So for us, we wanted to try Svelte. We didn't know if it would be great. So we were like, you know what we do know? We know React. So let's just start with Svelte. And let's say something really, really terrible goes catastrophically wrong down the line. Well, we can just say at that point, backup plan, let's just go back to React. Stick with what we know. So going back to this, I am a very big fan of pulling as much logic out of components as possible. One of the reasons I always said to people is like, what if React isn't the king at the end of the day? What if we want to move from React to Svelte? In this case, what if we want to move from Svelte to React? Well, all we have to do is bin the component files, and we can keep everything that's in TypeScript. So if we did need to just cut our losses, switch back to React, we still have to rewrite quite a lot of stuff, but it's significantly less than if everything was in Svelte. So TLDR, have an escape plan. Future you will thank you. That's actually not meant to be that, but anyway. Also, yeah, future you will thank you, just for anything. Have an escape plan, but most importantly, like, figure out when you're going to consider this escape plan. So we had the steps architecture. We said, let's try one step in Svelte. Let's see how it goes. Fortunately, we didn't go, oh my God, Svelte is terrible. We actually went, Svelte's pretty good. So we pushed on and we did the entire app in it. But we did have that little thing at the back of our mind that was like, we can kind of pull the escape board, get out of here, cut our losses, and go. So how did it go? I think it went pretty good. There's 2 people here in the audience who built with me, and sorry, 3 people, I think. I don't know. There's a few people in the audience here, and I think it went pretty well. I personally I still liked Svelte at the end of this all, which I think is a pretty good, kind of, I don't know, pretty good testament for it. I think everyone else in my team still likes Svelte. Yeah, got a couple of nods. Excellent, excellent. I think the code ended up pretty good. So we caught a lot of bugs in development. We have some pretty comprehensive tests coverage for it all. I can't give you numbers because I don't have any numbers. I just think it did really good. And we built various test apps trying to use our library in various different frameworks. We found it pretty easy to use. We didn't find any major roadblocks where we were like, oh my God, this just is not going to work. So pretty positive, we think. But big question. How much of that success could be attributed to Svelte? This is the bit where I'm going to be like, oh, I'm standing in front of an audience of Svelte enthusiasts telling them that actually our Svelte project, I don't think succeeded because of Svelte. So Svelte is great and all, but the only thing it gave us is that consuming it from non-React apps is easier. This architecture, this philosophy, this everything could have applied to a React app rather than a Svelte app. So I think the real takeaway to this is that good engineering practices are key to everything. It's really, really boring, but testing your app, documenting your app, architecting your app carefully, that's the important thing at the end of the day. So part number 3, how can these learnings be applied outside of our particular project, our particular use case? So to use a technology, you need a good reason. And as much as I hate to say it, we already know how to use React is a really, really good reason to use React. So you might come along and say, Svelte is a really good idea for this project for these reasons, in which case you should go do it. But do not switch from React just for the sake of switching from React. Changes are hard. I don't like change. Any changes you do want to make, try and keep them as small as possible. So if you try and change too many things at once, it will be overwhelming. I tried to do it in my previous company. I was like, hey, we're an Angular shop. Yeah, let's try and use React. And then they were like, okay, well, if you want to use React, why don't you just design the entire thing from scratch? I thought it was like a kind of fantasy project of like, this is what I could do if I had unlimited resources. So I was like, let's use F#, let's use NoSQL, let's use like Kafka queues for everything. And then they turned around and they were like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's implement it. And I was just like, oh no. Whew, that did not go well. No one had any idea what was going on. The project got binned after about a month, I think. And then they were like, maybe we shouldn't let Junior organize our entire architecture for this project. But yeah, change one thing at a time. Any changes you are going to make, try and leverage existing tools that you're familiar with in order to make it much, much easier on yourselves to pick everything up and understand what's going on. And smaller changes, smaller risks, more likely to succeed. So do not go and say, I'm going to change our entire tech stack for this one project just because. Whereas if you are trying to go from React to Svelte, you'll probably be okay. If you're trying to go from React to, I don't know, Blazor or Fable and change your entire ecosystem from NPM to .NET, oh boy, you better have a really good reason for that. So next up, have an exit strategy. Like, I know you want to think that Svelte is perfect and great and everything. I wanted to, but I was also a bit like, what if it's not? Have a think, what am I going to do if it fails? What's plan B? You never want to think about that, but you have to. So next thing, be a good engineer. new shiny toys are great, but don't have new shiny toy syndrome where you reach for every single new shiny toy every single time you have a problem. Svelte's not silver bullet to fix all your issues. Write good talks, good docs, good tests. Be really boring, and you'll be all right. So you'll be glad to know the appearance of this slide means that I'm almost done speaking. So in conclusion, introducing new technology has benefits, but the risks do need to be considered and managed. People are reluctant to change. Change is hard, and there must be a compelling reason to challenge the status quo. At the end of the day, it's the really boring things that matter, such as following good engineering practices and documenting design decisions. And that is all from me. So thank you very much for listening. Are we doing questions?
Yeah, questions? Do you want to switch over to the other mic? And...
Yes, I will do that.
So someone was asking me.
Hello. Is
okay.
Oh, yeah, it's working now. Hi, everyone.
So, if there is any talk, if there are any questions in the chat, I'm looking at the chat now on YouTube. I can't really see anything to ask Lucy. So let's open it up here. Anyone got a question? Yes, loads of questions. Okay, what's your name? Come and ask. You okay to come up and ask? You okay to come up and ask? So, sorry, we have to pass the microphone around so everyone online can hear us. If you're okay with being on camera, you can stand over here, or if you want to wave to everyone. I don't think that
camera. I mean, do I like face out this way? I'm going to ask you a question. So it's not about Svelte, it's about docs and all of that stuff. So like I've currently got a very small team, they're very junior. They don't always document, and it's quite frustrating, you know, not getting that outcome. How are you able to encourage people to actually document, and testing as part of that, but documentation in particular?
Yeah, so I find for the more junior members of the team, it's very much like very smaller scale things, like low level kind of actual implementation of things. I think for that, as I mentioned, like testing is part of your documentation strategy. So I'm really sorry, Hannah and Jan, but I like really like whip them to be like, you will do test driven development, you will write your tests as you go. And I like to believe that it's made them better developers as a result. I really push them to, you know, test as you develop. That was the biggest part of like documentation on their part. The kind of broader, you know, pie in the sky kind of bigger picture architecture is not really juniors' kind of specialty. For anyone doing that, I would say that like writing things and getting your thoughts down on paper is really hard, but really important. Like to be able to talk to people about things is one thing, but to be able to just write something, they can read it, is so important. Like as helpful as the answer, just do it is, like just start writing documentation. It's the best I can say, really. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Lucy. Lovely talk. I had a question about test-driven development. So I found it interesting that I guess you mentioned that you also use test-driven development while building out UI components. And I feel like working with Jest while building on React is kind of horrible. So, like, how do you make it more palatable, and like, what's your philosophy for doing that?
Yeah, so I did mean to mention during the talk, I did forget, we've been just test completely. We have moved entirely over to Cypress component testing. So one of the hardest things about test-driven development with UIs in Jest is you cannot see the component. And I don't understand what timeline we live in where UI components are standard to test using a headless kind of library. I don't know why Jest is kind of standard. So yeah, we pushed to using Cypress component tests where you do actually have like a test runner and you can see it. And because it's running in an actual browser, you can do things like actually query the browser APIs for information. You have the developer debugging tools. You've got all those kind of things. So yeah, I think if there's one tool I would say actually contributed the most to our success, I would say Cypress component testing, because yeah, test-driven development of UIs with Jest is nigh impossible.
Quick follow-up questions. Sorry, just a single question. What do you think about Playwright in comparison to Cypress?
So Playwright I haven't used. I have seen it. I understand that Cypress you have to use JavaScript, whereas Playwright is really good because you can use any language you want. For us, we haven't had a compelling reason to try Playwright for our UI development because Cypress is good enough. And in case you fell asleep during my talk, I don't have a compelling reason to use Playwright over Cypress, and Cypress is our status quo. So, yeah, thank you.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks so much for your talk. It was brilliant. You made a very compelling case of a clear reason for why Svelte was a good tool for this project. Given your experience now with a real-world project, do you think there are other obvious reasons that maybe you didn't encounter yet, that other people can think of, obvious extreme cases in which using Svelte would be great, and maybe some other obvious reasons for which using Svelte is really not that working? Would it be ethical?
Yeah, so I think Svelte and React do the same thing. Essentially, at the end of the day, you can use both of them to get the same job done. You can use Angular if you want, if you're crazy, but so we had a very compelling reason to use Svelte over React. I think so. I know saying I said I wasn't going to talk about performance. As far as I understand it, Svelte is significantly more performant, like quicker to load, smaller bundles, things like that, greater compatibility. React has essentially not moved in 4 years. So I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more people saying, well, we don't want to use React because it's fallen so far behind. That is more of a fuzzy argument to say, well, we want to move to Svelte because it's better. It all depends on like what your appetite for risk is. Like, are you in a really big kind of corporate firm where everyone needs to use the same tools, or are you a really, really agile startup where moving to Svelte and being able to get things done quicker might be a really good reason for you? So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
The only reason why I was clapping was because just nodding along, and I was like, oh, okay, I think I need to clap. Sorry, Max, you can ask next.
I was just going to add. Oh, sorry. I was just adding to what Lucy said. We did have some customers. So I'm a product manager for that project. We had some customers. We did a little prototype of whether an embeddable component was actually worth pursuing as an approach, and we just like took our hosted site that was already in React, bundled it up into a component, and just like got it out there just to see that it worked. It did. The bundle was like horrendously big. So clearly people do care about performance with consumable components when delivered via NPM. And actually, when we delivered this component, we actually decided for dynamic imports or URL imports. So the component isn't consumed normally like you would expect via NPM, but rather it's consumed at runtime. And that adds, I think, to the need to consider performance. So we actually, several of the different approaches we took compounded to make that kind of advantage of Svelte even more useful.
Yeah, thank you, Max.
So yeah, just about betting on Svelte. There's a member of the community here, Chris Ellis, who's not here today, but he is quite a big company. He's at a startup, not quite a big company, and he's onboarded a lot of developers from React to Svelte. And one of the main I won't say argument, but one of the main things he says is that it's quicker to onboard React developers onto Svelte. And I'd like to argue, if you're fresh into a Svelte project from React, you would, it's very HTML-like. So you would feel at home if you were just a vanilla, in quote marks, JavaScript developer. But also, if you're a React developer, you would find it very familiar. So what do you think about that for tossing it over the fence, basically, when someone has to pick it up when you're long gone?
So I think first of all, Svelte's site is like really, really good. Doing the Svelte tutorial is like really quick and gets you like really up to speed. I think one of the really nice things about going from React to something else is it's really easy to say, oh, how do I do an effect, but in language X? So in terms of onboarding, I think like if you have that common language, if you have the common concepts, which you do, I think that, yeah, onboarding someone onto Svelte from React I don't think it was that difficult. I don't know how the rest of my team felt, but people seem to be pretty happy with it. I think that answers your question. Where you've gone. Okay. Oh. I think it's worth specifying that state outside Svelte components implies Svelte stores. Am I wrong? So one of my favorite libraries ever to exist ever is RxJS, so reactive JavaScript. I know people think that it's scary and big and all that stuff, but reactive observables and Svelte stores are actually very, very similar in their concepts. So you can, and we did use Svelte stores for the state, mostly because they were built into Svelte. We were already using RxJS for some things, and moving it over was quite easy. I believe you can use Svelte stores not with Svelte, though that is kind of me. Yeah, I'm getting a few nods. That's brilliant. Svelte stores kind of exist in TypeScript land, and all they are is a place to put data and a place for that data to be updated at a later point. The only thing Svelte really gives you is that really nice, easy way of like referring to them in the templates. You can actually do that with RxJS observables as well. So my personal website, I don't use Svelte stores, I use RxJS observables, and they work pretty much seamlessly. So yes, state outside of Svelte component files can be in a store or in RxJS observables or Redux or any number of other things like that.
So I know with stores in a Svelte component, you need to have the $ syntax, but outside letting a TS file, just do your .get set for it. That's how we'd use it. I didn't know you could use it outside of Svelte, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Yeah, the $signs. The $sign is the best thing though, because you don't have to mess about with like setting up data and all that crap. So
you could, if you were mad, you could use Svelte stores in a React app if you wanted to. I don't know why, but you can.
Okay, so do we have any more questions for anyone else? Just let me quickly check the chat, and if there's nothing else, we're going to wrap it up. So if you're watching on YouTube and you've not got it on a delay, now's the time to ask. And sorry, just grab that.
Okay.
Right. Cool. So Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lucy, for such an awesome talk. And thank you, Codet, for hosting us. And thank you, Lucy, for letting me use your computer for the whole stream. It's been great. Thank you very much. Great turnout. Before we all go, we're going to end the stream now, but just before we go, can we all get a picture of us all sat in our chairs enjoying the meetup? And we'll say thank you to everyone online, and we'll see you in September. Thanks.